Yeah, here come to another keynote section from Jimmy Zhang. He is he is from the Hong Kong Computer Society, and he is going to share about the API trends and beyond. And thanks again, Jimmy, for your support this year. Can you hear me well? And is it so? Can you speak?
Yes, Patrick.
Uh,
Can you hear
yeah,
me?
yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah, okay,
Cool.
loud and clear. So I can see your screen as well. So let me pass the time to you. Okay, thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, Patrick, for the introduction. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, everyone. It's a pleasure for myself to join this event again to do some sharing with all of you. So today we are focusing on API. So basically, we want to look at the trends and how things are going in API. But first of all, um, let's look at how important is API, because this is a key topic we are talking about today. So according to some of the research, basically more than one, when we look at in asking business about the how they're going to adopt API in their projects, etc., we can see actually there's an increasing trend of utilizing API in every type of projects in the business. You can see from the chart here, basically for all the digital transformation project, modernization project, or even innovation project, you can see the growth. I mean, compared to 2021, about 70 something percent of their projects are utilizing API technologies. But now, actually more than 80% for all those categories. Another interesting trend we see is recently we can see companies more focusing on ESG, the social environmental kind of initiatives. So we are seeing a lot of sustainability project coming up, and a lot of them actually 80% of them will be involving API. So basically, from business investment and business initiative perspective, API is becoming even more important. Now let's move on. Look at from the developer side. So according to the research with a lot of developers in the world, you can see that actually over 90% of the developers are using API. And it's interesting fact is 69% are using third party. That means they're using API developed by other persons or provided by other producers. So you can see the ecosystem in the world on API is gradually starting to build up. And hopefully in Hong Kong or Asia Pacific, we are going to see the same trend. On the right hand side, you can see some of the chart diagram there. So actually all kind of industry or business type are also moving more towards API. In particular, as you can see, telecom and healthcare are spending a lot of their investment on API. Oops, sorry. From the developers, when we ask them whether they're going to use more API, you can see actually more than 68% saying they're going to rely more on APIs in the future in their projects. So both from the business perspective and from developer perspective, API will be even more important. That's why it's important that all of us keep abreast on API technology and enjoy events like today's event. Okay, now let's move on. According to the research from Smart Bear, basically what the key business driver for using API. Um, in fact, for these reasons, the business driver haven't changed much in the last few years. So the top one is still about reducing the cost and time. And you can see it's actually increasing the importance. So basically for all the business nowadays under digital economy, um, shorten time to market, agility, and lower cost is the top important drivers. Another two won't surprise us is because a lot of enterprise, they need to interoperate between their own system, internal system. That's why they are moving towards using API technologies. And finally, by some of the product company, they want to expand the functionality of the product. The easiest way is to build up more API. And in fact, because of the emergence of ecosystem, that is even more important. So we can see from business driver perspective in API development, those are the top three reasons. Oh, let's move on to looking at the technology side of API growth. So what's driving? Again, this is from Smart Bear report and doesn't really change too much. The top 10 is very similar, but you can see that in the top three, there's still about microservice architecture and DevOps. as still the dominating factor in driving all the business and people adopting API. In fact, followed by machine learning and AI won't surprise us at all, and security. One point we noticed that is when we talk about tech drivers, sometimes people now looking at about remote working is also a driver on other perspective as well. Okay, we talk about microservice is the dominant technology driver for API adoption. So let's look at some of the trends and statistics. So from the Datadog report, actually in the past 2 years, we can see for company or organization using microservice architecture, the number of ports in their Kubernetes environment has been doubled in the last 2 years, from 500 in average to over 1,000. That's quite a big jump there. And another interesting point you looked at is when we ask the people when they do the container platform, what are the choice they are taking? We can see that actually there are lots of increase. I think it's more than 70% from previous years. And now it's nearly 90% of those people using microservice. They are actually leveraging public cloud managed microservice. For example, like the Azure AKS, etc. So I believe one of the key reason of that is when we start transformation, a company or enterprise want to focus their energy and resources in actually building the API and the applications. The management of the platform itself is better to rely on the public cloud service provider so that they can actually focus their effort on the actual application development. So for the audience here, if you are actually starting your journey on microservice, this is one consideration you can take. So another interesting statistic there is showing that what are the highest typical images running on those container platform. Probably I won't say I would say it won't surprise us at all, because the top three you can see is Nginx, Reddish, and Postgres. Because a lot of people moving to a container platform, they're talking about adopting more open source, and those are the popular choices for microservice. Okay, DevOps. This is another very important technology trend that is driving the adoption of API. So according to the DevOps market research, the prediction is the market size of DevOps market is growing very quickly. It's nearly it's 19% per annum. So it means more and more people adopting DevOps in their development. It won't surprise us at all, because there's this tightly coupled with using microservice. And according to other research, basically when you're not asking people who has already deployed DevOps, 99% of them have a positive feedback, saying there's a positive impact from their DevOps deployment in their organization in 2020s. And actually 61% saying by using DevOps, actually they can improve their product quality, and 49% saying actually they can shorten their time to market. This is exactly what we are looking for in a desktop environment. So when it comes to DevOps, sometimes we have a decision on what kind of tools we want to use for DevOps. Again, it shouldn't surprise us at all. The top tools is GitHub and Jenkins. It's quite popular because it's starting a long time ago. But we are seeing other tools actually picking up space, like for GitLab, or even if people use enterprise using Azure, Microsoft, they are probably using Azure pipeline as well. So next one, another driver on API adoption is machine learning and artificial intelligence. So again, from the market research report from for DevOps, the AI growth in the next few years is very high. It's like 30% per annum. So and when the survey asks about leaders, what kind of business or what kind of functions they are going to adopt AI and ML, 33% saying is using for business analytics, and 25% for security. So if your organization is looking for doing more business analytics and also looking for enhancing your security. So probably looking for some surface or product with a great API support will not be a bad bet on that one. So since we're talking about security, security is absolutely important in modern days digital world. So API is no exception. So as you can see from the chart here, from the State of API Security Report from SOT, you can see those lines are going up. What it means is very simple. Actually, the number of malicious attack, API attack, has been increasing a lot in the past years. So actually, you can see the increase is quite alarming. It's more than 100%. So I think according to another research, we are talking overall in the world, about more than 2% of API calls are actually malicious in attack. So we are seeing the trend is going up. So basically, security is something you have to really pay attention if you want to adopt more API technologies. In fact, when we look at security for API, it's not that simple. You cannot just acquire a product or acquire one service and believe that can address all your security concern. You need to handle the whole API life cycle. So people talk about shift left, but that is not the only solution, because although you can address some of the security problem during your development or even the planning stage, but there's also some other threats that are coming out in the production phase. So when you look at the overall security, it has to be end-to-end, and your strategy in handling API security has to be end-to-end. So the next slide is showing some response from those people taking the survey about the kind of threat they are concerned about from API. So you can see that the highest top 42% is talking about they're worried about zombie API. It's about API that have been left there after a while, and your developer have developed new version or new API capability, but forget about those old one that's already running. So that's why I'm saying in the last slide that the whole lifecycle management is very important. Otherwise, you can expect you will have a lot of zombie API running around, and that may become a vulnerability within your environment for the hackers. Another concern from people about API is about account takeover or exposure of sensitive information. For example, if your API, when you decide you expose unnecessary data, that may become a problem in other areas. So again, the security of API is not simple. It starts from the planning, design, all the way to the production running. Okay, next trend we'll talk about is IoT. In the last few years, IoT has been growing a lot in the world, and everybody is expecting the expansion of IoT. And the annual growth rate is about 20%. And in fact, we are seeing a lot of IoT service or product. They are actually using API to connecting to different API platform service, etc. So as I mentioned in the very beginning, we are seeing a lot of business. They are starting to run some ESG related initiatives, and even starting from very simple, like your workspace environment. If you want to measure the cloudiness with your environment, whether people are using in the room, whether you want to reduce your electricity footprint, etc. A lot of things depends on IoTs, and those IoT will be pushing data back to your AI or your system or your application at the back end through different APIs. And therefore, ESG initiative is one of the key drivers in the growing use of API, actually. Next, let's look at the protocols. So basically, when the survey asks people about what kind of protocol they use, it's expected. REST is the dominant choices in the moment. But another trend we are seeing is more than 80% of respondents saying that in their environment or their project, they're actually using more than one. So as you can see, now people starting to get used to API, and they start thinking in some scenario REST may not be enough to fulfill their requirement. They start looking for alternatives. And in particular, there are a couple of alternatives that we're seeing a growing trend in the market. For example, Graphql and also Kafka, we can see they are increasing a lot of attraction from the market. The growth is quite significant. So for example, Graphql is increased from 19% to 24%, and Kafka is actually just jumped into the list, and then it's 90% of organizations already using it. So I think one of the insight from this is for your development team, they need to keep pace with the development, and in fact, they should be learning more on the new kind of API technologies through attending a seminar like this one, etc., to keep them abreast of those things so that they can actually use it and apply it in their own projects. So GraphQL, just a little bit of the benefit, talking about why we prefer GraphQL sometimes over RESTful API is the key advantage is it actually it can fit very well to very complicated business requirement. And you can also prevent the typical overfetching, underfetching problem within RESTful API. And in fact, GraphQL also have out-of-the-box validation of the data and the field that actually can improve your security. And another interesting statistic from some market surveys, you're seeing that now more than 70% people thinking GraphQL will become the future API, dominant API protocol that people will be using. So it's probably the right timing we start learning that and test it around. Okay, Kafka. Kafka, although it's gaining a lot of popularity in the market, but when we look at the primary reason of that is about event-driven architecture. That actually address some of the limitation in RESTful API kind of situation. So according to Gartner, I mean, some paper published a couple years back, they define event-driven architecture 3 types: queue-oriented, log-oriented, and subscription-oriented. They have different pros and cons. For example, if you want to retain those information and replay information, or you have to stream a lot of information, log-oriented model may be better fit. If you want to have different consumer using different protocol, heterogeneous environment, maybe queue-oriented is better suit your environment. So I think event-driven architecture is gaining a lot of popularity in the market as well because of they can address some of the limitation of RESTful API. And therefore, we also encourage developer to start experimenting those architecture and start using that kind of API so they can actually make their tools more, the API repository more of complete and be able to serve different business requirement. Okay, now let's move on to API specification trends. Martin, in the previous keynote speaker, talking about open API, but when according to survey, people still very get used to Swagger and using JSON schema. It won't surprise people, and in fact that will be continued. But again, since the open API is is becoming more mature and getting more traction in the market, I think again, as developer, we should also embrace ourselves of the new specification and start moving towards some of the standards in the market to improve the interoperability, etc. Now let's move to the end of my presentation. I just want to capture some of the major challenges that we see from those different survey and report from the market. So as you can see here, actually, this is about producing API, the obstacle. But in fact, if you look at the other flip side of the coin about consuming API, it's quite similar actually. People or developer telling or IT decision maker is actually facing the challenge. The top 3 are we don't have enough people and time. that's actually not just API. It's about digital transformation. Everyone is lacking the resources. But another key obstacle we can see is from the producing perspective, is the lack of design skill. That because as you can see, the use of API has been increasing very quickly in the market, and every enterprise project is adopting API. And because we don't have that many people, and in fact, people with resources is one of the limitations. Therefore, it's very understandable. The people with the right skill in designing API is very scarce, and therefore, with more project coming up, that will be another problem. So for company, we should be to better prepare yourself on going for the API journey. We should make sure we develop the people, establish the standard, and make sure we can have proper standard for your team to follow instead of every developer or designer doing their own thing. That will actually help address this issue. Another thing didn't mention here about, for example, consuming API challenges about documentation. That's one of the, I think this is the top one challenge that for people consuming API as we fed in the survey. So again, besides writing very good code and using all the tools, CI/CD, etc., I think documentation is still a very important point. How to make sure that your API is well documented and also people can easily understand how to use it is another angle in driving this API journey. You can have the best API in the world, the most secure API in the world, but if nobody understands how to use it, that will not be useful at all. So just want to remind the audience here, besides the technical part, we also need to look at the usability side of the API as well. So yeah, that's actually the last the conclusion of my presentation and sharing. Thanks all for listening.
Okay, so thanks, Jimmy, and then this is a very good overview. So we believe that in our upcoming 40 plus talk section, we actually covered the detail of different part of from Jimmy, like Kafka, the developer experience, etc. So we still have 1 or 2 minutes, but just a quick question maybe to Jimmy. So I forgot to mention, Jimmy is actually from the enterprise architectural specialized group. So he's from the enterprise architecture background. So what we generally talk to the business is that, okay, they have the technical challenge and also the operation and business challenge. You do mention besides the technical part, there should be also the governance part, the documentation part, etc. So can you share 1 or 2 quick tips? Okay, when there, if we need to open up some API to external parties or even across team, do you have 1 or 2 tips to share to the audience? Where besides the pure technical part, what they should pay attention? Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick. This is a very good question. As I mentioned, because of there are so many technologies and there are also lack of resources and skill in the market. But on the other side of the coin, a lot of enterprise companies are driving and trying to using API in more of their projects. That actually come up a very difficult question. Is if every project doing their own thing or every developer doing their own API design, that would become a chaos in the near futures, and it would become a governance problem. As I mentioned, there are lots of security concern and issues about zombie API, etc. So I think for enterprise, if they are going to adopt the API journey, I think the first one they need to think about is their overall strategy on their API. So are they going to use it? What's the ultimate goal of it? Are they going to focusing on internal system integration, or they are going to actually adopt the open API and also monitoring the API? That's the number one. The number one is about the business strategy, what they are going to do, and then they should have a roadmap about how they move towards that strategy. In fact, I don't think it will be a very simple roadmap for all the enterprise to adopt API in their journey. It's probably like 2 to 3 years at least to become more mature. Since I'm from the enterprise architecture background, I can tell you that it's not that simple. Just buying a API product or API management gateway and then deploy it. There are lots of integration. There are lots of standard that you need to establish and also train your people to use. So once you have the strategy, you have the roadmap, then you need to select your products and you need to establish your standard so that your development team can actually using the same language and same approach to develop the program. And that actually can improve your reusability. I think that's one of the key objective of microservice API is to reuse as much as possible, and then you can continuously evolve your API and application with a shorter time to market, etc. So I think probably that's just my 2 cents on how people can
Mm.
go for the API journey.
Okay, maybe just one quick extension on the previous topic. So we also talk to different kind of a company. They have the thoughts to adapt the modern API or modern architecture, but most of the enterprise they have challenges. Okay, they have already got a solid, robust, maybe I would say legacy or traditional architecture running well for 10 years. So maybe like what you mentioned about the outdated or zombie API, but it's still working. So do you suggest that maybe there should be two group of governance on how you may be recommending the enterprise, how they can leverage the best of the both worlds? Do you need to have two different dedicated team, etc.? Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, Patrick, you just raised. In fact, from my personal point of view, I think it's more appropriate to have two groups or two teams to start with, because I've been running operation for more than decades, so I can tell you that it's difficult for people to change. And in fact, if you look at the different development the paradigm, the mode 1 and the mode 2, they're quite different. So if you want to build up your capability, I would suggest you actually start with a small team, a new team, and then they start gaining momentum and they have the maturity in place already and the governance. Then you can start thinking about how to integrate the two groups together and how to eventually
Mm.
merge into one. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Dreamy, for your answer. So this is a very typical question, and every years we did the API days, and then after that we got a bunch of questions. This is the top one question. So I take the chance to see your point of view as well. So once again, thanks for Dreamy's support this year as well. So we are going to move to our next sections. So thanks again, Dreamy. Okay.
Thanks, Patrick. Thank you. Bye bye.
Okay. See you soon.